Hello my friends and welcome back to Sherman School, where we're going to keep learning all about the iconic American M4 medium tank that served as the backbone of the Allied armor divisions during World War II. In our last class, we studied the three main upper hull types used by factories across the United States during the war and how to identify the variants that employed each of those types. Today, we're going to continue on our hull work by talking about the nose of the mighty Sherman, the differential cover. Over the course of the Sherman's production run, three main types of differential cover were developed, each with its own special characteristics. So let's dive into it. Grab yourself a beverage, get cozy, because class is in session. Alright, so we left off talking about the H in our heats system for Sherman identification, the hull. And our differential cover is one of the two main hull components that we need to check to help accurately ID any of the nearly 24 subvariants of the M4. As mentioned in our previous episode, if you'd like to pick up a copy of my Sherman Spotter's Guide or Sherman Datasheet posters to follow along at home, you can do so in the shop right below this video or over at spruceandbrews.com. Not required, but they can be a handy reference to have. But before we chat about the three different differential covers that we'll see on the various models of the M4 Sherman, let's back it up a step. What exactly is a differential? In a motor vehicle of any sort really, the engine is going to turn a drive shaft. That drive shaft in turn needs to transfer that power to an axle that the wheels are on, right, to move the vehicle forward. Now, if that power were to go into a single axle with two wheels on it, and those two wheels receive power evenly, that's all fine and dandy when you're going straight. But when you need to turn, the outside wheel needs to turn to cover more ground at a faster rate than the wheel on the inside. If those wheels are powered evenly, though, then we're going to get dragging and sliding on one of the wheels. It's not a clean and efficient use of power. So to compensate for this, a differential takes that power from the drive shaft and through a system of gears allows each wheel to be powered independently. So when you're rounding a corner, for example, one side can move faster and one side can move slower to compensate for the turn and maintain your power control. That's a very simplified explanation, but in any case, it's the same with tanks. On all variants of the Sherman, the powertrain is up front. The engine is in the back, so that transmission is right between the driver and the co-driver. That feeds into the differential, which in turn feeds into the final drives, which move the drive sprockets, which move the tracks forward. The nose of the Sherman is the housing that contains the differential, the final drives, the transmission, all that good stuff. All that said, the earliest version of the Sherman differential cover came in three separate cast pieces of steel bolted together. The easiest way to identify them is to look for these two big bolted ridges running parallel with the body of the tank. The concept here is that maintenance crews could relatively easily remove these bolts in the field, pop the entire final drive assembly out of the tank, and either fix or replace whatever you needed to. But once these early Shermans start seeing combat, it becomes clear pretty quickly that the three-piece differential cover is a little bit of a problem. It's simply not strong enough to withstand the rigors of combat and field service, and that intended simplicity of removal and replacement ends up being the design's Achilles heel. If this piece of the tank takes fire, even if the armor proves to be effective and the round doesn't penetrate, these bolts would shear off like crazy, and it would be a royal pain for the maintenance crews to drill those out and get this thing off afterwards. So you're only going to see the early three-piece differential cover on your earliest variants of the Sherman. Early M4A1s, early M4s, early M4A3s, and interestingly, all of the M4A4s. The folks over at Chrysler stuck with the early three-piece covers for some reason. Worth noting, it is quite rare to see a fielded M4A2 in action with the three-piece cover. Odds are, if you do see a welded hull Sherman in combat with the three-piece cover, it's almost definitely not going to be an M4A2. By the time late 1943, early 1944 rolls around, you're really not going to be seeing many of these three-piece covers. If you do see shots from Normandy, for example, or later ETO campaigns of a Sherman with a three-piece cover, it's probably either a war-weary veteran, a replacement tank that just got pulled out of reserve back in the States, or an M4A4, as previously mentioned. Around this time, production of the differential covers shifts to what we now refer to as the early one-piece cover. The technical part name is E4186 because just like scale models, everything has a part number. These are just a little more complicated. Now, looking at this early one-piece cover, very easy to tell the difference between it and its predecessor. It's one piece, as the name suggests. It's one big piece of cast steel. Strip of bolts along the top where it connects to the upper hull of the tank, strip of bolts below. A lot easier for crews to remove this, and it's quite a bit stronger. As production continues, though, there are some slight modifications to the one-piece differential cover, which eventually result in the late one-piece cover, part number E8543. Again, very similar, Big one-piece cast part, strip of bolts up top, looks familiar. Two key differences between the early one-piece and the late one-piece. The first, and the easiest to spot, is the toe lug. Early one-piece covers have a single toe lug horn on either side. Late one-piece covers have two toe lugs on either side, and there's a little footstep welded onto either side as well for the crews to get on the tank. So early, one lug, late, two lugs. Simple enough. Beyond that, the late differential cover has a sharper nose angle than the earlier version. It's hard to tell when you're not looking at them next to each other, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's one of those things. The early one-piece has a more bulbous, gently sloped curve, while the late is a bit of a tighter angle. And finally, small detail but worth noting, early one-piece covers have a little lip at the top that's designed to protect that upper strip of bolts. You'll notice that the bolt heads are still protruding a little bit though. On the late one-piece cover, those bolt heads are recessed into their own little grooves for even better protection. Now, for identification purposes, M4A1s, with the exception of our earliest 75mm armed versions, are almost always going to have the late one-piece cover. For the M4s, 75mm armed tanks will either have the early three-piece or the early one-piece. All of the howitzer versions with the 105mm main gun, though, will have the late one-piece cover. M4A2s, as mentioned, very rarely have the three-piece cover. Only the small hatch M4A2s will have the early one-piece cover. Everybody else is going to have the late one-piece cover. M4A3s were almost exclusively fitted out with late one-piece covers. The only exception is going to be the old reserve small hatch M4A3s that were brought over to the ETO after the Battle of the Bulge to help rapidly replace tanks lost in combat. And all of the M4A4s, as we learned, have the three-piece cover with the exception of some of the Commonwealth upgunned Fireflies. Now, I know that's a lot of info, and it's kind of hard to piece all those out, but that is why we have the heat system. We definitely need more information than just our differential cover to determine which variant of the Sherman we are looking at. And with that said, in our next class, we're going to be moving on to the E in heats, and it's time to chat about engines. Be sure to subscribe right here to Sprues and Brews Scale Modeling so you don't miss out on that next installment of Sherman School. And until next time, my friends, be well, happy building, cheers.